Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of the Gomobi.work coaching series. Each week, we're bringing you a topic in coaching to help you and your team work better together, have more fun, make more impact, and enjoy it a lot more while you're at it by adopting a lot of these purposeful collaboration practices, which we love so much here at Gomobi.work. My name is Wade Bruffy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gomobi.work. And I'm joined by my co-founder and our chief coaching officer, Mr. Zoltan Sarda.
Hi, everybody. It's good to have you all here. I hope this is helpful. This is one of my favorite topics that we're going to focus on today. I'll have Wade introduce it in a moment, but it's just the idea of how are we really defining what we're doing and getting really deep understanding and alignment around our practices. So hope this is helpful.
Yeah, Zoltan, I forgot to mention that I heard from our friends at Purpose and Performance Group, and they mentioned they had a podcast along these lines where they were talking about this leading yourself and what that means, how that translates into leading other people, and how alignment is such a big part of that. And so awesome. I thought that, look at that, to where we're two peas in a pod.
Yeah, we'll have to put a link to that podcast on
Great idea.
Yeah,
great idea.
Good.
So very good. Well, you're driving. So let me really quickly put us into speaker mode so we can put this up after we're done and people can watch it. So it looks good. We're ready when you are.
Let's see. Sorry about that. Okay.
No worries. So I guess I will jump in because I put this slide in here. And so thank you, Zoltan, for the introduction. What we wanted to express, and alignment is one of our favorite things to talk about because we are constantly finding out that these little misalignments are what lead to problems that are sometimes of a dubious origin. Sometimes people just feel this sense of discontent. They feel a sense of dissatisfaction. We like to often call this WTF syndrome, when people are just sitting around being like, WTF, why is this happening? So alignment is a super powerful topic, and it's something that business leaders are talking about all the time. And we think that these conversations are super productive. There's a lot of great content out there, but there's one piece that we add to this. So we add to this definition of what alignment is and what we drive our customers towards. So we're excited to share a little bit about that with you today. And really the idea behind what really good alignment does is it puts people in charge of their own work. We want to create this agency for people to do their best work. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of what the standard conversation that we see in business and business leadership is today, and how we can even enhance that a little bit further. So very glad to have you with us. You're going to take this information, you're going to do awesome things with it. So very good. So we have this little graphic. I can't remember where I saw this, but it was so beautifully and simply illustrated. And I recreated it for you all here. And last week, I hosted a talk talking about coaching with your mouth shut, and really what the ability of asking a great question is to get somebody to do this autonomous work. And so what you're seeing in front of you is pretty self-explanatory. If you're in an organization where you are highly autonomous but not aligned, you have a lot of people moving in different directions. And each person is trying to do their best. That's one thing that we truly believe, is that everybody wants to do their best work and is going to put forth that effort. But even with the best of intentions, if you're all pulling, last week I used the analogy of, if you've ever played tug of war on a playground, you know that the key to winning that game is that everybody goes 1, 2, 3, pull, and everybody pulls in the same direction at the same time. But if you had a bunch of people pulling the rope sideways, one person's letting go of the rope, they don't even know which direction, or that they're even needing to hold on to a rope. This is misalignment. However, when you have this organization, which is very aligned, but also autonomous, people have this freedom to be creative and to come to these amazing solutions that maybe are outside of the box, unorthodox, and innovative. Things that can really change the landscape of your business. And they're also able to do that in a way where everybody is very cohesive and we're all moving in the same direction together. So that's the power of alignment.
And I think we have an example from the sports world. I think one of the things that you see in sports world is that there's this real focus on, number one, deliberate practice, to really focus on the small things and then really get that alignment, particularly in a team sport. So this is actually from the Olympics, I believe, in London a few years ago. And it's the kayaking women's 4-person kayak race. And we're just going to play a clip of this. And I think the thing to see here is that when you look at these women, there are differences in how they're working, like how they sit, how they hold themselves, but there are certain things that are absolutely aligned. And when you see the boats that are coming out into the front, there's absolute alignment around certain aspects. We'll just play this for a moment here. There we go. So the thing that
little do people know that Zoltan was a semi-professional ocean kayaker for some time, and still is very active on the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Zoltan, what are people looking for here?
So the couple of things to look at, I think. So again, the thing that's going to make these boats move, the idea is like, who can move the boat fastest for the longest period of time? And I think that there are certain things with alignment here. So like when you watch this lead boat in particular, their paddles go in the water at exactly the same time. The length of their stroke is exactly the same. They have different sitting positions. They have different sort of ways of holding their shoulders and all that. But those two core things, the blade going in the water at the same time and coming out of the water at the same time, the more consistently they can do that over the course of the race, the faster the boat is going to go for longer. So when you just look at these, it's like, if you just look at the blades, it's almost like it's on a machine, that they're all the same piece. But you can see
the second white boat looks fantastic right now.
Yeah. And then you can start to see, like, if you watch one of these races, you'll see the boats that are starting to slow down. They are, they're less, the alignment starts to fall apart. But I think that's again, in the sports world, we really think about this kind of thing all the time. It's like, what are the specific things that we need to practice to make the team efficient, or to make, to take that lead in a way. And so that metaphor, bring it into business, is like, what are those specific parts of our work that we really need to focus on and practice in a very deliberate way is the key to this work. And then part of that is like defining that. So these people, these boats know, core thing, blades go in the water at the same time, they come out of the water at the same time. And everything else is sort of open, but those are the things we're going to deliberately practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. Yeah, that synchronization is just an extremely developed form of alignment.
Okay. So
amazing. Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, I mentioned the traditional lexicon around alignment in business. And so we see online and in a lot of articles, we saw this one, which was from Rhythm Systems, which is another business that does employee management and team goal setting. To software platform for that kind of thing, which is great. We have a lot of those features built into our platform as well. And we liked this article because we thought they summarized 4 areas of alignment really well. And starting with really the first one that everybody thinks about, the stereotypical alignment, which is that businesses and their people need to have this, their different divisions need to have this sense of strategic alignment. They have to have an agreed upon idea of where they're going and what they're going to try to do to get there. And so that's what people usually think of, but we're going to start talking a little bit about how we're going to get into a little further there. The next piece of that is the personal alignment piece. If you have worked in HR for some time, you've almost certainly been exposed to hiring. A lot of the conversation around hiring is, how does this person fit with our team? Is this person going to be the type of person that does well in the environment that we're creating here in our company. And the best organizations in the world, they do this really well. So that the people are aligned with the culture. And there's also this vertical alignment, which is where the people in the organization, all of the individual departmental level goals up and down the organization's org chart, if you think about it vertically, are all moving towards, even the people at the very lowest part of the org chart are contributing up that line in a vertical line towards the big company goal that everybody is contributing towards. So this is something really powerful. I think if people are not doing this super intentionally, this is a great place to start with that vertical alignment. And then finally, we have the horizontal alignment, which really comes into play if you've ever been in a role where you're a product manager or you're doing strategic partnerships. This is a big part of it. You need to make sure that the people that you're working with, if you're working across teams, and I think and some of the most recent research is really showing that the world's highest performing organizations are cross-functional in many ways, that these organizations have high alignment between departments as well. So we're going to start talking about, these are really good foundational things to think about. And we also want to help you by giving you one more layer to this, because we really like what's going on here. However, in our view, we're coaches here at Gomobi.work, and we teach our customers how to do coaching and how to think about coaching. And so as a coach, we think about what kinds of specific actions are we taking every single day? How can we help somebody do their best work? And that's a big shift that's occurring in some of these world's highest performing organizations. We're going from this manager, this the person that's shouting orders, or maybe the area expert, somebody who's just gotten really good at something, to who's the best person at supporting somebody else in learning and growing and improving their skills. So in order to do that, we need a different type of alignment. And that fifth type of alignment is what we would say is related to these behaviors. So what kind of work strategies do we have? What kind of practices do we adopt? And these behaviors which we do use are what we can then coach on. Because if we have a really clear alignment around what kinds of actions that we need to be taking on a daily basis, and this could be things that are internal to us, areas of growth for us personally, as well as skill development, those are really powerful ways of going a level deeper into more of the behavioral piece that we, humans, as we're working with other humans and we're working to develop the people on our team, we need to understand, like, what kinds of things do we need to coach people to do well, so that we can, and what kinds of clarity do we need to generate so that we can give people this ability to engage in thoughtful work that is deliberate and that has these in the conditions of flow. One of the things that is needed is this clearly defined rule set. So we're giving people a framework to use, and so that they can take that framework and be more intentional about how they're growing, and it's more effective for the people themselves and for the leadership that's doing that as well.
Absolutely. And I think that this question of definition is, as you said, is really like, how are we defining these things? And I think part of this is almost like thinking about it at a micro level. Like, what are the very small, again, going back to that kayaking thing, that getting the blade in the water at the same time, that's a micro thing, but it's huge impact. So how can we sort of bring that model into this work? We're going to bring an example from the education world. If you've heard in our talks before that we both have a background in schools as well, and I think that there are, I think that the cross references or cross sort of practices and communication between the educational world and business world is not developed enough. I think both can learn from each other. So part of our intention is to think about, so what are the best ways of thinking in the education world, and how can they apply to the best ways of thinking in the business world, and vice versa. So an example from the education world, I'm just going to go, and again, going back to this core value, and we're going to get into in a moment thinking about this exercise around defining those strategies and practices at a micro level around your core values. But a core value in sort of progressive and project-based learning schools that are currently, sort of like trending in education these days, is this idea. This is just one core value: students leading their own learning. So again, this is just an example of how we think about this. There's a lot of ways to get to that. There's a lot of ways that teachers can structure what they're doing so that they get students to lead their own learning. The converse of that, which is what we see in most schools, is that kids just sit there waiting to be told what to do, and their teacher tells them. It's almost like the empty vessel model. It's like a teacher's going to fill them up and the kid is just the passive recipient. But this core value of students leading their own learning, taking charge of the direction of what they need to learn and making decisions about what they're going to learn. And so there's this concept in the educational world of what are the instructional strategies that a teacher is going to use to get to that goal or that core value. So this idea, we talked before about working strategies. In the educational world, we frame them as instructional strategies. So what do you see a teacher doing in a classroom that's going to lead to the goal? And so I'm just going to highlight this one instructional strategy as an example of that sort of micro development. And so again, this idea of the instructional strategies, that they're specific practices that teachers use. And so we have this core value. How are we going to get to the core value? Students leading their own learning. And so one of the instructional strategies, I coach teachers a lot. And so one of the instructional strategies that you can use in a classroom to get to this idea is that you create these curated resource lists. So in a typical classroom, what you see is that a teacher has a book or a resource. Everybody reads that book together, or they look at some information together and they go through it, and the teacher sort of steps them through this book. Having a curated resource list, it's a different piece. That like the teacher thinks about what are all the resources that a student is going to need to be able to do to say, okay, so here's my next steps in learning, and that they can access that information. So then what happens is it becomes that the teacher is not working with the whole class, but they're working with individual students and small groups on really understanding those resources and thinking about what's next. There's a lot of other instructional strategies that get to this concept of students leading their own learning. But if you just choose this one, it can have some big effects. And so this idea, if you think about a student going through from K through 12 in their educational career, if every teacher is really good at just doing that one piece, what would happen between kindergarten and grade 12? Well, pretty soon, every student is going to be really good at saying, okay, so I know how to access resources. They get a little bit older. Not only are they accessing the resources that the teacher is providing, but they're going to create their own resource lists. They're going to be contributing. It's going to be like this mutual thing. That's the goal. And they're going to be making decisions about their next steps. So if you think about just this one small change that everybody's doing, all the teachers are doing deliberate practice on, then you have this huge effect over the course of the 12 years of or 13 years of a student's life. The thing that happens, though, I think, and that I've seen in schools, is that we sort of talk about that, but then it doesn't really necessarily become part of the ongoing conversation, coaching, that this is important. This is an important thing for us to focus on and to really get into the nitty-gritty on it. And so then people stop doing it. They go back to sort of just doing that one book at a time. Teacher leads them through it, because that's sort of the ubiquitous kind of practice. So thinking about that in terms of business strategies, working strategies. So we have this exercise that Wade's going to lead us through now.
Yeah. And this is an exercise that we use with every one of our clients. And so we're excited to share it with you. And we want you to take a moment to think about the core values that your company has created. And whether you threw this together with your founding team in a nice afternoon workshop, or this is something that you've been working on for 10 years, your core values are an intimate connection between who you are and who your and the spirit of your company. So it's informing what type of organization are we, and what does that look like in the world. And so these are our value-based statements, and they're very powerful. And so really, we get caught up a lot of the time in the idea that our values are these kind of lofty aspirational items, but what are really values other than a set of ways of being? So we want to encourage you, and if you need our help, reach out to us, because we do this all day long, to encourage you to think about how to operationalize these things. So what are the work strategies, the practices, the behaviors that embody that core value, that enable that core value to exist? Because those are very actionable, and guess what? They're also very coachable. So that is what we would encourage you to do. We have this example for you to jog your thinking. You've probably heard of Apple. Apple is a company that really abides by some powerful core values, and some of those are to make great products. And we really like this one. We believe in the simple, not the complex. If you ever dealt with an Apple product, you know that is part of their ethos. And one of the things that they do from a business strategy perspective, getting back to that strategic alignment and the vertical integration, is that they want to own and control the primary technologies behind what they make. And that's so that they can have a great control over the user experience, which is what a lot of what the value that Apple is providing is, that user experience. So if you think about how this shows up, we like this. We believe in the simple, not in the complex. If you think about what Apple does when you walk into a Apple store, or when you use a computer for the first time, in the Apple store, you have everything just laid out in a very clean environment. And if you want to walk over and experience the product, then you pick it right up off the table and it's right there. And they also have merchandising tactic. You've probably seen it going around online. This has been, I think, going viral lately, but the angle at which they put the screen so that you have to go over and adjust it. So they make everything into this simple, but very alluring retail experience, which is super powerful. It sells a lot of products. And then if you look at once you get that laptop open, how it actually works, Macintosh was the first operating system to pioneer the drag and drop. Back in the day when Microsoft and DOS was, all code. So you'd have to tell things where you wanted it to go. Most people probably don't remember that, but if you're listening and you do, you know what I mean. This is this intuitive user interface that Apple has really prided itself and built a brand around.
I would say I would also say that the one thing that they could improve on that simple, not the complex, is the iPhone, where you want to close your apps, you have to scroll on each one. It's like, let's just have one button. That's a suggestion for
I love it.
That's a core value. It's like, is this practice that a customer or user has to go through, is that the simplest way to do it? They missed that one a little bit.
So what we would encourage you to do is really to take these core values and to think about, attach some strategies to them, attach some behaviors. And what we would encourage you to do is go talk to people throughout your organization, because guess what? Chances are that if you have spoken to people throughout the organization, they're going to have different ideas of what these things look like. So in order to present these as clearly as possible, you need to include as many perspectives as possible, because your people in your customer relations department and your design department and your manufacturing department are going to think about these things differently than their counterparts in the other department will. So if you're thinking about what are these strategies, think of maybe 3 to 5 for each one, and then ask your team, draw some similarities, find out what do people think that this looks like for them. And by getting to know what everybody thinks, you'll develop this really clear picture. And the topic of our talk today is about alignment. This is how you get to this really deep sense of alignment, because you are literally asking people, What is it that this means to you?
Yeah. And I think that this idea, when you're designing these strategies, practices, behaviors, that clarity around, so you don't have that ambiguity, like that idea for the teaching example, it's like create a curated resource list. That's a very clear, unambiguous, there's some strategies on how to do that, but it's really clear that if we're coaching a teacher into this, it's like, have you done that? Let's look at that one piece. Or those kayakers, it's like, where's your paddle going in? That's a very clear and specific. But then this question of what do they look like, as Wade said, across different departments, what does each of the core values look like in customer relations? What does it look like in design? What does it look like in manufacturing? Any other department, but having that same level of clear descriptions about what that practice looks like. So again, I think some of the next pieces with this work is, once you have those definitions, you might start with your leadership team, thinking about what does it look like. You might bring your managers into that. Then the idea is getting towards that common understanding and agreement. So going back to Wade mentioning the WTF syndrome, I actually think that comes from you're sitting in a meeting, something comes up that you haven't heard about before, and people go, WTF, where'd that come from? Or my coach says something to me like, you should be doing this. It's like, where'd that come from? I hadn't heard of that before. So like, there's this, how do we get it so that everybody understands what all those core practices are, all those working strategies that we are saying, this is what we want to do, and that we're working towards that. So then how can you duplicate this through the company? So then you're bringing key managers in, you're bringing key employees in, having that discussion. And then, how are you comparing those? So part of this thing is like, if I say this is, if I say what again, going back to the education piece, if I say this is what a curated resource list looks like, and Wade, you have a different interpretation, we need to have some conversation there. Like, okay, so what are we talking about, so that we're, so people are getting the same message is kind of the key here. And then I think that last piece, you and I have talked about this a lot, Wade. It's like, these things should not be static. Like in some ways, our core values are static. Like you have, Apple has had the same core values for decades. You want those to be solid, so people have that guiding line that they're going for. But then, like, in terms of those practices, what's new? You bring in new people into the company, and there's like new expertise, new background. So how can we do it, like regular updates of looking at this, making sure we're still aligned and calibrated basically on our expectations of what these things look like, and how are we communicating those so that they're a living part of what the company is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you scroll forward a bit here, Zoltan, we asked earlier, what would it look like if a teacher was able to apply this over 13 years of a student's life? Well, we want to ask you the same thing. What would happen if every leader in your organization was equipped to give people the kind of support that they need in order to develop to the optimal version of every single one of your employees? And so this clarity is the first step around what this is. So that's what our exercises get moving you towards. And that's moving you towards aligned action. If you know what practices need to be done, you'll have a much higher rate of success in doing that. And when you're taking that aligned action frequently, you're going to generate better results. And when you're generating better results, you're generating growth for not only your people, but your business, and not only your business, but your people. So it's really a beautiful system that this encourages. And if you adopt it successfully and think about it as an enriching layer to the other alignment work that you might do as an organization, with the help of a great tool, that would be something that can be very, very powerful.
Absolutely. And I just think that that idea of deliberate practice leading towards autonomy and mastery, it really takes an intentional work particularly around that first stage of clarity. I think that we often assume that we all have the same understanding, but we don't necessarily.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Sultan. Well, thank you so much. This was super, super beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat today, but if you want to send us a question, please do. We're reachable on LinkedIn, by email, on our website, www.gomobi.work, or wherever else you might find us online. So thank you very much for joining us. Hope you got a lot out of this.
Absolutely. And as always, let us know what you think. You've got not only a question, but like, how does this relate to what you do in your work? Build this community.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Wade.